Greetings and welcome to Rebekah Koffler with Censored but Not Silenced. This is your daily intelligence briefing for Monday, May 16th, 2022. We are in day 83 of the Russia-Ukraine war, a highly consequential conflict that has significant implications for the United States, Europe, and possibly even the world. First, the BLUF, as we call it in the intelligence community, or bottom line up front. I will give you 3 top points for today. First, Russian President Putin has signaled potential interest in de-escalating broader tensions with the West. Second, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is rapidly gaining a tipping point in favor of Ukraine. But Russian President Putin has initiated a dangerous parallel asymmetric strategy. And 3, the Russian and American military leaders have resumed direct communications. Now, let's give you the details. First, today, on Monday, the Collective Security Treaty Organization had a summit, which was presided by Putin. During this event, Putin stated that the potential membership for Sweden and Finland in the NATO alliance does not present a problem for Russia. Quite a change of heart, isn't it? Especially in light of the fact that previously a senior Russian government official threatened the so-called military technical measures against these 2 countries if they join NATO, and Russian state TV ran an episode during which a Russian journalist threatened to place nuclear weapons close to the border with these countries, Russia's borders with these countries, Sweden and Finland, in response to their potential ascension into NATO. So what is this change of heart about? First, let's look at the specific language. Putin is the master propagandist, so each word matters here. So this is what he specifically said in Russian, of course. So I'm giving you the best English translation, or as closest as possible. So what Putin said at the CSTO summit today is that Russia has no problem with these countries, meaning Finland and Sweden, in the sense of a direct threat presented by the expansion of the alliance. But the expansion of military infrastructure to these territories will demand a response, he warned. This is possibly a disguised attempt by Vladimir Putin at de-escalation of broader tensions with the West. Remember, this conflict is not just about Ukraine. This is a proxy war between Russia on one side and the United States and NATO on the other, over control of Ukraine, which is part of the former Soviet Union, and Putin views it as part of Russia's sphere of influence, and not only that, part of Russia's strategic security perimeter, on which Russia relied for a century for the protection of the heartland and of its capital, Moscow, from foreign invasion. So they don't believe when NATO says that it's a friendly alliance, that NATO has no interest in invading Russia. All of that may be true, but Putin uses a purely military calculation in this conflict. The distance between NATO forces and St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia, has reduced from the times of the Cold War to today from 1,000 miles to 100 miles. And so, even though our leaders are trying to convince Putin that NATO is not a threat, Putin is making a rational, in his view, decision of trying to make sure that Ukraine doesn't become part of NATO. And he stated as much, calling it a red line several times in the past. And but coincidentally, recently, in the past several weeks, the US government admitted actually that Washington's primary objective was to weaken Russia, to weaken its economy, and also to degrade its military capabilities. Secretary of Defense Austin stated as much, and Senator Lindsey Graham said, let's take out Putin by helping Ukraine, and all sorts of rhetoric like that. So it just basically gives confirmation to Putin that regime change is something that Washington is after. This is what the Russians have suspected all along. So Putin is realizing that since the war in Ukraine is not quite going according to his plan, his forces are depleting very fast. So he's looking for potential de-escalation. He has no off-ramp. He can't come out and say, I am willing to stand down. The man obviously is proud. He's still mulling over his nuclear trump card, of course, but he is floating a trial balloon, trying to figure out how do we respond. So this is why he made this distinction, this nuance, you know, potentially saying, okay, Sweden and Finland, you can go ahead and become part of NATO, but as long as you don't host military hardware, as long as you don't host NATO forces, which is actually highly unlikely from the NATO standpoint, but Putin is saying, go for it. I'm not going to cause much trouble, at least at this stage, because he's really not in the position to. So that's the gist of that one. The second one is regarding the momentum that Ukraine is gaining in this conflict. Okay, so the Russian forces have been depleted. Russia lost potentially 1/3 of its deployed forces in Ukraine, which originally were 190,000. That's what Putin was able to assemble on the border with Ukraine, while negotiating with President Biden and his experts over the so-called security guarantees. So that was basically a euphemism for stalling negotiations, and that served as a cover or as a deception operation to pacify President Biden's, to give Putin time to assemble a formidable arsenal of weaponry, logistics supplies, blood supplies, so he can start this, what he calls a special military operation in Ukraine that began on February 24. So Putin is realizing that there's no chance he can secure a clear military victory in Ukraine, because the conflict is, as I said, a proxy conflict. between Russia and NATO, whereby we provide tremendous amount of support to Ukrainians in terms of military assistance, formidable weaponry, real-time intelligence that has resulted in the Ukrainians being able to kill a dozen, at least, of Russian generals. This is unprecedented, this type of support that Washington provided for a country that is not a NATO member. Intelligence sharing is reserved for really trusted partners, okay, such as England, United Kingdom, rather, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. These are the Five Eyes. And then we have individual bilateral intelligence sharing agreements. And we're very, very selective as far as whose hands can such secret information fall into. So Putin knows that. So what does he do? He has effectively blocked Ukraine's access to Black Sea. And right now he's blackmailing Ukraine, knowing that Ukraine's economy is highly dependent on its ability to export grains. So Putin is not allowing the ships to leave carrying these cereals, these grains, and the G7 countries that just met over the weekend, they are warning about the potential global food crisis where 43 million people can potentially be starving. So this is the ultimatum that Putin is presenting to the world, potentially pressuring the populations of these countries that are going to be affected by this conflict, even though they're not active combatants to the Russia-Ukraine war. Putin is hoping that once they get hungry, they will start placing pressure on their governments, asking their leaders to withdraw support from Ukraine and to stop the sanctions, the draconian sanctions that Europe and the United States have been placing on Putin in the attempt to change his behavior, which is absolutely not going to matter. It's not going to do that because sanctions have been placed on Russia since 2014, and they haven't changed his behavior because economic concerns and security concerns are two different things. And so, yes, it will weaken Russian economy. It will specifically make the Russian people's lives a lot harder. When it comes to oligarchs, okay, instead of 5 yachts, they'll have 2 yachts, okay? Or Alina Kabaeva, Putin's girlfriend and the mother of his at least 3 illegitimate children, who she likes to bathe in luxury. Okay, maybe she won't have 5 Gucci bags, but 1, and 1 Prada, let's say. Okay, I'm trying to make light of the situation, but I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that the real target, unintended perhaps, target of Western sanctions ended up being the Russian people. Okay, and so this is what's happening. The Black Sea blockade is effectively designed by Putin to strangle Ukraine's economy. So this is his asymmetric step. And then thirdly, a positive development. After multiple attempts, finally, the Russians have picked up the call from our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. I want to remind you again that it's crucial to maintain active communications between the two countries that are the world's most powerful nuclear countries. They have the most formidable nuclear arsenals, the United States and Russia. These arsenals continue to point at one another. And so right now, we are in a highly dangerous period where the risk of miscalculation and unintentional escalation of hostilities that could possibly lead to a hot war. Instead of the proxy war, it could very easily become what Joe Biden called the shooting war between Russia and the United States. And if that happens, the conflict will go very rapidly into the nuclear realm because of Russia's conventional inferiority. Putin fears NATO's intervention in Ukraine, but he views this conflict as an existential battle, not only for his survival, but for the survival of Russia. Remember, he placed everything into this conflict, his legacy, his ambitions. He can't possibly lose this. He knows he has no off-ramp. He's been called a war criminal. This man can no longer remain in power, were Joe Biden's words. Senator Graham called for on the Russian people to effectively take out Putin. So he knows that there is no off-ramp for this guy. And so he is going to fight hard. And the one trump card that he has is nuclear weapons, specifically tactical nuclear weapons, in which Russia holds a 1-to-10 ratio advantage over the United States. We have 200, the Russians have 2,000. Not only that, Putin has trained his forces in nuclear warfare. He practiced himself pressing the buttons, and he does that routinely. And this is what's on his mind. But fortunately, finally, after February 18th was the last communication by phone between the Pentagon and the Russian Ministry of Defense. So fortunately, on Friday, they have reconnected, and that's a good sign to maintain these lines of communications so that we can at least ensure that no misunderstanding takes place. Now, is that a guarantee? Of course not. Is Putin going to pick up the phone and call Mark Milley or Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to warn that he's about to pop a tactical nuke over Ukraine? No, he's not going to do that. But in terms of a large-scale nuclear war, to where, like during the Cold War, both countries sought to decapitate each other's leadership if such a war were to break out. No, there's no such plan right now that Putin has to initiate a nuclear war, to strike even one nuclear warhead on the territory of the United States. That is out of the question. I want to be clear that everybody understands that. Ukraine, which is not a NATO member at this time, is on Putin's target list. Absolutely. So hopefully both sides will find a way to de-escalate, which is extremely important at this point. Nuclear warfare is something that is obviously horrendous, and Putin knows that it's a taboo in Washington and in Brussels. The Russians believe we have low thresholds of tolerance for such type of warfare. And this is exactly why Putin prepared what is called escalate to de-escalate strategy, specifically for this type of scenario where conventionally he cannot achieve victory. Like right now in Ukraine, which again, we're providing tremendous support to. And so it's especially crucial for both Washington, Moscow, and Ukraine, by the way, because Zelensky has done several escalatory moves. He's been proven, a Ukrainian hero who has united the world. He's using his acting skills to garner support for his country, understandably so. He's under attack, but unfortunately, he has needlessly been poking the bear with several of his statements, and it's truly dangerous. And the fact that we are now being led, the United States, by a person who's a highly trained actor who is, knows how to invoke emotions in audiences. He is putting translators in tears when he goes to give speeches at the United Nations, United States Congress, British Parliament. He knows how to package these videos, which are atrocious. I mean, if anyone has seen these videos, it's just heartbreaking. But remember why this is being done. And so my final message to everybody is that the proverbial black swan, which is what we call in the intelligence community, low probability, high risk scenario, right? That black swan is getting darker and darker, blacker and blacker. And what I mean by that is that the risk of a catastrophic action by Putin, who feels right now cornered, okay, cornered like a rat, or cornered like that bear. And we know that a cornered bear ought not to be poked, okay? He needs to find a way to come out of this with his face saved. And unfortunately, there are no chances. So all of the sides, all of the three sides need to seriously start thinking about de-escalating this highly consequential war. This is Rebekah Koffler with Censored But Not Silenced. If you like this intelligence briefing, please subscribe to my channel. Check me out on Twitter at Rebekah0132. I'm also on Getter at Rebekah0132. As you probably already know, I'm a former DIA intelligence officer. DIA is a military counterpart to CIA. I've also written a book, Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. And I wrote the foreword for another book, Zelensky, the Unlikely Ukrainian Hero Who Defied Putin and United the World. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye-bye.